All right, what is up, you guys? We are live on YouTube and Facebook right now. I just want to say thank you guys so much for joining. If you are watching live, and if this is your first time attending one of these Facebook or one of these live presentations, you don't know what Nomad Insider is. Just very quickly, what Nomad Insider is all about is that once a week, I try to look at all of the news in the digital nomad and remote workspace and compile a list of what are the most important things going on in the world. What are the news that you need to know about in order to stay informed? And that's what I do here in these lives once a week. And so if it is your first time joining, in the chat, let me know where you're joining from. I love to hear where everybody is tuning in from. And if you have any questions, feel free to jump in there and ask questions. I will do my best to answer them if we have the time to do so. But we have an interesting news reel, so to say, for today. Starting off with a kind of a big announcement coming in. This one is all about job cuts. So very, very interestingly, what we got an announcement from recently was that we are seeing, this is from Forbes. I'm actually going to pull up, let me get my screens all figured out here. I'm having some issues with the way that this is coming up. But Forbes is reporting on the fact that there are a ton of, let's see here. All right. So Forbes is reporting on this study that says that as many as 1 in 4, about 25% of financial service firms plan to cut their workforce over the next 5 years. Now, obviously, this is a big development. A lot of financial institutions in New York have been dealing with COVID and what does it mean when a lot of their employees can't go into the office. And really, this is mixing in with another big development inside of the financial institutions, which has been that more and more of the jobs that were done in those in that service are now being done by AI, and they're a lot more efficient. They're able to create a lot more profit for the companies, and it's in many cases cheaper for the companies because they don't have to have the workforce to do it. And these two trends are sort of mixing in that space at the moment. And the interesting thing here is that, funny enough, at the very, I would say kind of like at the beginning of this year, many of the companies that are talking about this were the first companies to want to pull people back into the offices. They were saying like, hey, we need people back in the office. But I think what's happening here is that because they were forced to continue to work remotely and have to actually figure out how to do it, they've now seen the benefits of that. And in reality, what we're finding is that the fact that they've figured out how remote work works means that these companies can hire from anywhere. And firms are far more interested in hiring people from lower from parts of the country where they can hire people who don't need as much money to live, as opposed to people who are living in NYC who have very high demands on how much they need to make in order to live in New York City. So this is a very interesting trend that has been happening for quite a while already. Like I said, this is an industry that AI has already played a big role in, but now it's mixing in with remote work. It's mixing in with that, and we're going to be seeing, like they're saying, almost 25% of the jobs inside there, they're possible for automation. And then whatever they're not going to automate, they will most likely look to hire people who don't need as much money in order to get that job done. This article goes on to talk about some other interesting trends that are happening there, where essentially a lot of the companies, a lot of the institutions that were NYC based are starting to move out of the city and look to set up shop in parts of the country which have more favorable taxes, where the people who they need to have in office can actually, whatever they are doing in terms of whatever they're doing in terms of rent is going to be lower for their offices. So this is a very interesting trend. This is something that we need to keep an eye out on. And as more and more industries have this experience, I think we're going to be seeing this as well. This is something we've been reporting on and talking about for quite a while. inside of the Nomad Insider newsletter, we also shared a graphic this week of um, just what industries are very likely to be automated. And I think that is a very important thing to keep an eye out for if you are considering your future inside of an industry, or you're just entering the workforce if you're somebody who's younger and wondering, what do I want to dedicate the rest of my life to in terms of work? This is definitely something to keep an eye out for because it's going to be very, very important. But all right, the next story that I want to talk about here, this isn't so much a story as something that I thought was interesting. And this one is coming from a company which has been remote from before COVID. And if that is certainly something that uh, would have been very, very helpful for many companies, is to essentially know what to do before going remote. And I thought that the two of the things that this company found kind of like as their biggest takeaways are very interesting. Now, I'm not going to try to pronounce this company's name. I think it's a Lingable, as a very tough name to pronounce in my opinion. But they had three big takeaways from this story. One of them is, sure, throw out your preconceived notions of what work will be, but the two important ones were to develop a goal-oriented culture of ownership. So I think the idea with this, and this is something that we'll talk about in one of the next stories as well, is that when you are working in an office environment, a lot of what like a good work day constitutes of is, are you there at 9 and do you leave by 5? But remote work is really far more around like, did you get your goals done? And I don't really care how long you worked. I just care that you got those things done, because it's incredibly, incredibly hard to track someone's time spent working on tasks when they're working remotely, when they're not physically in an office. So I think that is a very important takeaway. I think if you're working remotely, if you're leading a company remotely and you're still trying and forcing this idea of how do we track people's time and do we pay them based on an hourly time spent working, is going to be very, very hard. Obviously, that in some industries it's harder to do than others, but I think this is an important thing that an important takeaway here from this company. The other thing was that they found that there's no coffee breaks with colleagues. This is definitely something that a lot of remote workers struggle with, is how do I actually build a community? How do we build a culture around our company and around what we do if we can't see each other face to face? And I think that this is something that we're going to see develop way more in the remote work space. One of the things that we've been discussing a lot is that you can't replace in-person relationships. You can't replace the sort of relationship building that happens when you get to see people face to face and you get to hang out with them. I think what we're going to start seeing over the next couple of years are remote work companies really bringing in more of this idea of getting their team together in person from time to time during the year, specifically for the benefits of getting people face to face. So not necessarily getting them in an office to work together, letting them get their work done remotely, but then bringing the entire team together once or twice a year, more for this sort of team building atmosphere, team building goals. So I think this is a very interesting takeaway. It's something that, again, we've been talking about for quite a while on this channel and in the podcast, all about how this is something that needs to be happening. So I think that this is certainly an interesting takeaway. Moving on, I thought this was maybe one of the more interesting findings from this week, and that is that many, many remote workers are reporting to have second jobs. Now, there's a few interesting statistics that I want to share about this that make this even more important. Let me pull up that. All right, so check this out. So this news piece, WTOP, is essentially reporting that a survey of 1,250 US adults working remotely full-time found that 69% have second part-time or even full-time jobs. Now, I find that very surprising that it's that high of a percentage, as you can see it right there. I would be curious to see how this percentage changes based on what the jobs are and if that testing size increases. But what's even more important here is that the survey also found that 47% of remote workers who have doubled up on jobs say they work 40 hours or less per week of both jobs combined. So even though these workers are taking on a second job, they are still not working more than 40 hours a week. And the reason why I find this really, really interesting is that it supports exactly what we were just talking about with the previous story of how do you structure work, right? Do you structure it based on goals, or do you structure it based on the amount of time that somebody's spending at work? Because even if you're not structuring it in the way of like goals focus and not time focused, people might still be taking on a second job, still getting their work done, but essentially overlapping their work time. And this is essentially exactly what this article talks about, is that actually many of the people in that study are kind of doubling up on work during the same time periods. And they're still able to get their work done. And there's nothing legally that actually requires them to disclose that to either employer. So I think that's a really interesting finding. I think that we're going to see a lot more of this as well. I think we're going to see, in general, more of this idea of maybe working a few part-time jobs that are goals oriented and not necessarily having this idea of hey, this is what I do 9 to 5 every single day. But very interesting study there. It's definitely something where if they have a bunch more statistics going in there. So if you do have, if you are part of the Nomad Insider newsletter, you can go and check that out in more detail. And if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, it's completely free. It goes out every single week, and you can sign up for that at Nomad Insider at thatremotelife.com/Nomad Insider. This next story that I want to talk about isn't so much a story as it is, I think, an interesting trend. Malta is essentially being highlighted by BBC about their remote work visa program. And this is something that I find very, very interesting because we're starting to see the trend of the remote work visas, of all of these things moving outside of our niche of guys like me covering this, and entire news platforms like BBC really focusing on this idea. Malta, of course, is a very much, has been a front runner on this. They've been very ahead of the curve with this kind of stuff. They're offering a year of living in Malta as a remote worker inside of Malta. You do need to prove that you can make, I believe it's 2,700 euro per month in order to get that remote visa, but then you get a year access to Malta. Malta is also one of the most highly vaccinated countries in Europe. So you're going to have some sort of benefits around that in terms of how much you're allowed to do inside the country, since they've been able to reopen quite a few things safely due to their high vaccination rates. Finally, you guys, today I want to talk about, this is sort of a more, I don't know what to call it. We're not 100% sure what's going to happen with this. But last week, towards the end of the week on Friday, I believe, we actually heard about a development inside Reddit where one of the developers, and if you're not familiar with Reddit, Reddit is kind of like an online forum where you can go in, and it's one of the largest social media platforms in the world. And it's the people who use Reddit are very, very excited. They love Reddit. It's a really great community. But one of the developers for Reddit actually announced on Twitter that they're trying to develop a way to turn their karma points, which are essentially point rankings on how trustworthy somebody is inside of the community. If you make a post that is liked by a lot of other Redditors, they can upvote it, and you can get karma points for having contributed something of interest to the community. And they're trying to find a way to essentially turn those karma points that Reddit uses for that function into something that is based on top of the blockchain, something that is crypto focused. This is something that is very, very interesting. We've also heard some other social media platforms discussing something similar. Facebook has announced that Meta now has talked about wanting to enter the space as well. So it's going to be very curious to see how this works out, because essentially you could end up creating a platform in which, if you're contributing value to the Reddit social media platform, you can actually start getting rewarded for that uh, financially, where other Reddit users can upvote and add karma points to your profile. And that is something that has a monetary value attached to it. So this is something that's really interesting. This was something that was hypothesized in crypto has been hypothesized for a few years. But it's a very interesting thing to hear one of the lead developers for Reddit come out and actually announce this and say, like, hey, we're working on this. This is something that we hope to achieve relatively soon. So I think this is definitely something to keep an eye out on. I believe that they said that it will be built on top of Ethereum. Don't quote me on that, but this is a very interesting news, something that I also look forward to hearing and learn more about in the coming months. But you guys, this is kind of the top news that I want to talk about for the week. I think that we're going to be hearing more and more crypto-related news as well toward the end of the year. But this is it for this week. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Like I said, I do this every single week. I know that it's Tuesday today. I most of the time do it on Monday. However, I was not able to do it yesterday. So make sure that you subscribe to my channel on YouTube so you don't miss any more of these Nomad Insider videos on Mondays. And then I also publish a new video on Wednesday and Friday as well. So the best way to never miss one of those is to hit subscribe, so hit the bell so that you never miss one. But all right, you guys, I'm not going to blabber on any longer. I'll let you guys get on to it and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. I hope that you're doing well.